Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Use Green Teams as an Effective Way to Engage Your Staff. So this webinar, again, like last week, is brought to you by CitySwitch and is facilitated by Mark Boulay from Green Steps at the Monash Sustainability Institute. We often talk about the value of green teams as useful vehicles to engage with staff and to generally contribute to the improved sustainability performance of an organisation. So today's webinar hopes to provide all of you listeners with some practical examples, some ideas and some tips that might help with the way that you create your own and then run a green team within your organisation. So as I said, to help us with this, I'd like to again introduce Mark Boulay from Green Steps. Mark has a long background in staff engagement and education on sustainability issues, and we've actually held several face-to-face workshops and now a few of these webinars with Mark. So welcome, Mark.
Thanks, Paul. Good to be here again. And look, just to remind everybody a little bit of housekeeping, we'll be muting you all throughout the presentation just to reduce the amount of feedback that there is in terms of audio. But if you do have any questions, there is a chat box at the bottom of the panel that would be on your screen, and if you use that to ask us questions throughout, we'll try and answer them either halfway, or we'll have a time at the end also to ask you any questions, for you to ask any questions that you might have.
Fantastic. So, Mark, what are you going to be talking about today?
Before I get to the outline of today's Green Team webinar, Paul, I want to talk, I want to share a story which might be a common one and you might be familiar with as well as those people listening. So imagine an organisation that says, okay, we want to address this thing called sustainability. We want to, green up our performance in some way. So a common response then is, well, let's start up a green team. Let's get together a group of staff across the organisation who are interested in sustainability, and we'll have them come together. There might be muffins there. We'll have a first meeting, lots of ideas thrown around. Everyone walks out feeling very excited and very enthusiastic about what can be done. And then the next meeting rolls around a month later. Again, lots of enthusiasm, lots of excitement. Again, maybe muffins. Not much has happened between those two meetings, but there's still the full team is there and everyone's raring to go. So again, lots of ideas, lots of talk, lots of possibilities shared. And that becomes the pattern then for the next 6 months. Lots of meetings, lots of talk in the meetings, but not much happening between the meetings. And after a while, you slowly see the membership of the green team drop off, attendance to the meetings drop off, and in the end, people are a little bit like Snoopy here, of wondering where is everybody. The green team kind of has floated along, and when the green team is mentioned, it's, yeah, well, look, we used to do a green team, we used to have a green team, and we really need to review that, or it's not quite as good as it could be. Is that something, Paul, that's familiar to you from your experience with CitySwitch?
Yeah, definitely, and it's a question that I do get, or an issue that is raised by signatories reasonably often, that they get a bunch of enthusiastic people, they all have ideas and they have trouble setting a structure around it and implementing those ideas. So it's definitely something that we see, and we do have some guidance, but I guess that's something that we really want to learn from you.
Yeah, and look, I'd just be interested in those listening. There's a little button there that clicks that you can just put a hand up, and I'd be interested to see if others have a similar experience just by clicking the hand up button on your screen there. If this is a story that's common to your organisation too, and there's already a couple of hands starting to come up there in the list of attendees that I've got on the screen in front of me. So good. Clearly, this is an issue that is relevant for people. Hopefully, we can provide some guidance for that. So the provocation for today's webinar is a simple one, really. It's, while many people have a green team, many organisations have a green team in one type or another, they're often not as effective as we might like them to be. So there's 3 things that I want to explore today to help make green teams a little bit more effective. And these three are purpose, support, and love. And while none of these might be revolutionary concepts, I do want to focus on them because I often find that they're missing in the green teams that I've worked with, either all of them or one or two of them. And as a result, the green team might not necessarily be set up as to be as effective as they could initially have been. Before I do that, though, I want to share a case study from an organisation that we've done quite a bit of work with at Green Steps over the years. One in Water is a water authority down in southwest Victoria, so based in Warrnambool. And they'd had a similar sort of story, I suppose, to what you and I talked about before, Paul, which was we set something up. Look, it just didn't quite work. It's not as effective as it could be. We want to try something else. So together with Green Steps, they developed an appropriate green team structure for their organisation. There was a group of, and this happened once a year for 3 years, a cohort of staff were engaged across the organisation to come and take part in some training, which Green Steps provided. And based on that training, a number of workplace projects were initiated by this team of staff, and they formed small groups around those particular projects. The focus of this group of staff then was solely on the particular project that they were involved in. They got a little bit more support and training throughout a number of months of both developing and implementing the projects, and then they reported off on the success and the outcomes of their projects to the senior management team, so linking this quite formally into the structures of the organisation. Each team member had clearance and support from their manager for the time that they actually took to attend the training and for project implementation as well. And it's from these that I actually want to pull out some of these particular themes that we've just been talking about.
Mark, can I ask you a question there?
Yep.
It's a great case study and one that really speaks to the structure of a formalised green team. One in Water, though, is quite a large organisation. Are you suggesting that every organisation that wants to implement a green team should follow this approach?
Yeah, no, I'm not. Well, yes and no. If it's appropriate for your organisation, you think, look, this could be something which is relevant for us, then absolutely. But I think the principles of giving them a good purpose, giving them support and giving them love throughout, those are key. And in this particular case at One and Water, the program that they developed followed those particular principles, but had its own unique characteristics, obviously. So the characteristics of the program were unique to the organisation, but those three principles that we're going to highlight a little bit more in a moment, they were the ones that actually drove how this program looked like and then rolled out as well.
Okay, so the three principles, that's what we're going to focus on today. And just before you get into those, does the muffins fall into purpose, support, or love?
An excellent question. I think that they probably have a bit of both, although in many cases I find that muffins seem to be the sole purpose, unfortunately, sadly, for a lot of green teams. And when the muffins dry up, then also, sadly, so does the green team as well. So they shouldn't drive it, but they should definitely be there as part of the foundation for a green team.
All right. Well, when we put this on the website, we'll call it Green Teams: The Love Beyond the Muffins.
Exactly. Nice. I like it. So let's look at then outside of muffins, how the purpose of a green team could actually be defined. And I think it seems so obvious, but this is an area where a lot of teams actually fall down, and that they don't quite have a sense of what they're there to do. And a couple of things can be gone through to be a little bit clearer upon what this particular purpose is. And I think one of the key elements of this is to actually be clear on how this green team fits in to the broader sustainability program of the organisation. So if the organisation is already doing some things around sustainability, whether it's in energy or water or procurement or what have you, if there is maybe even a sustainability officer who has a part-time position or a full-time position, then how does the green team work in conjunction with that? So that the green team is not overlapping, it's not replicating things that are already happening within the organization, particularly one where there is already a track record around sustainability. So that's one of the first considerations, is what is the organization already doing in this sustainability space, and how can a green team complement or add to that rather than necessarily replicate it, or even worse, go off on a completely different direction in a different tangent to this particular sustainability agenda. And the sort of activities that a green team could do are actually quite broad. And I find, though, that a lot of green teams tend to be set up around this sort of principle of, well, we'll just do everything, which for volunteers, which typically make up a green team, is not necessarily a useful way to start. So again, thinking about what's already happening, and then what are some useful additions to the green team could be having to complement that. On the screen in front of you will be some of those particular ideas. So a green team could be there to be set up to monitor and benchmark the sustainability performance of an organization. So there's a data collection element to it. They could implement some very concrete and discrete actions around sustainability. They might be, in a large organization, they might be simply conduits for information and requirements around sustainability from a centralized spot, a centralized sustainability office. In smaller organizations, or organizations where this work hasn't been done yet, they may actually develop some policy and some strategy and some action plans around sustainability. They could be involved in reporting on performance. They might be utilized to engage other staff, particularly again in large organizations with multiple sites. They might be the models of particular types of behaviors and particular types of sustainability actions. So Paul, I guess what we're trying to get out of this here is that there's a number of very specific things that a green team could be doing. And the first work really is to understand what that particular purpose is, and to be very clear and specific about it. And that may actually be spending some time thinking about what are the terms of reference for a green team. What are they there to do? How often are they expected to do it? What are the time requirements, and so forth? So people have a very clear idea as to what it is that they're actually being engaged in or being asked to join. And initially, my recommendation would be to try and keep it very simple and discreet, rather than do everything at once, which I see where a lot of green teams fall over. So how does that work for you, Paul, in terms of your experience?
It definitely simplifies the idea, and I think key to it, and I'm not sure whether you'll touch on this later, key to it is to get ideas from people. So to be encouraging the exploration and implementation of ideas that people come up with, so they have ownership. But definitely this idea of purpose, of that the purpose is to complement work that's already happening, rather than to replicate it, and be very clear about that.
Yeah. Clearly, how the purpose of a green team is defined could be a collaborative thing where the members of the green team are asked, what would you like to be doing? But what I find is when that happens, it kind of opens the floodgates, and there needs to be some sort of parameters set around it to say, well, look, we're all volunteers here. Yes, we're given permission to come along to these things, but we only have so much time to dedicate to this sort of work. Of all the ideas, what are one or two that could drive our focus for the next, say, year? And obviously we might then review those terms of reference in the following year, and then add some additional ideas to it as well. What the organization is already doing in this sustainability space could then add some of those parameters around the ideas. Well, look, it'd be a wonderful idea if we had a food cooperative in our organization, for example, but we don't even know where we stand in terms of our environmental footprint, so maybe the green team could be collecting some data first. So again, being very clear on what the purpose is and using some of the realities of the organization to guide that is what I would recommend as being the first step. So that's it around purpose. And I realize, Paul, that you and I are rattling away here in terms of talking, between ourselves. If there's any questions that people have in the audience, please start typing these up, and we'll try and get to them over the next few minutes. And then if we don't have time to get to them all, we'll definitely get to them at the end of the presentation. The next thing, Paul, I want to talk about, moving on from purpose, is support for an organisation, and I love this photo here to signify
Is that,
support.
I don't know, does Malcolm Turnbull have a lot of support in the Young Liberals?
He actually runs the Green Team for the Young Liberal organisation. And I actually Googled support, and that was the first picture that came up. So I just love his cheesiness here. But what I want to do is, from this picture, I actually want to talk a little bit about what support might look like for a particular Green Team. And again, I want to go back to the case study at One on Water to highlight how they defined support, to see what some of these characteristics might look like. This handsome group of people here is the first Green Team within the organisation. So you have to know that one of the things that made this Green Team a bit unique is that every year it had a new membership, because their intention was to gradually roll out the sphere of influence of people that have been involved in this particular program. So every year the Green Team got a refresh, and because every year they were focusing on different projects. But what I want you to get from this particular picture here is that the people that are represented are from across the organisation. So the different business units of the Water Authority are represented here. The Water Authority has 4 different depots as well as central headquarters. People from the depots were represented in this. So that's sort of a vertical representation, if you like. There's also a horizontal representation. There's a person there who's actually part of their senior management team, right down to the most junior customer service officer. So the Green Team, one of the great ways to show support for a Green Team is to ensure that it actually has good representation from the organisation, both horizontally as well as vertically, because it means that the activity of the Green Teams is as widely embraced in the organisation as possible. That's the first thing I want you to get out of it. The second thing I want you to get out of this is that every person here actually completed a written application to join the Green Team, and that application had to be signed off by their manager. So the manager understood that the person that they were sending to be part of the Green Team was going to not just take part in the training or the meetings, but also take part in some work between the meetings and the training to actually implement some on-the-ground projects. So they had support from their managers for the time that they needed to actually be effective members of the Green Team. And the last thing is that this Green Team, at the end of its work, at the end of the year, reported on the outcomes, and the outcomes were very specific: what financial savings were made, what environmental savings were made, what social influences had occurred within the organisation. They reported off on their project outcomes to the senior management, including the CEO. So we had a forum, a half-day forum that senior management and others in the organisation came to, and there was a report back from the team. So there's a couple of principles here around what good support for an organisation, for a Green Team from an organisation might look like. The first is that some kind of management involvement either within the team or support for the team is critical. Unfortunately, it cannot continue to be an unsupported rebel alliance for a number of years. It's not going to be all that effective, and it means that very easily you can fall over if 1 or 2 key people leave. Ideally, it's representative of the organisation, both across and up and down. There is also a reporting component to the work of the Green Team. And again, this comes back to being clear on what the purpose are. So the team sets itself a bit of an agenda. It has some KPIs maybe even attached to it, and then it actually reports off on whether it's achieved those KPIs by the end of the year. And that at the end of my list there is the mysterious acronym of PDs and PMs. So that it's actually potentially being involved in a Green Team as part of people's position description, and also potentially part of their performance management, which was the case for the One on Water members of the Green Team. It was part of their performance management for the year, that they would be part of the Green Team and that they would be involved in some activities there. So Paul, this for me is what support for a Green Team looks like.
I think it's really important, Mark, that you touched on it being included in people's position descriptions, and while that may be a pipe dream for some, it's really good when when you set an agenda, you have terms of reference, you identify those things that you're going to report on, so that then you can get that that management buy-in, and you can identify the actual lines of work that you'll be doing to show that it is work. This isn't just something that people do in their lunch break, and then hopefully at some point that can fall back into to people's position descriptions.
Yeah, that's right. And look, most of the time, most green teams will start with a group of volunteers, and there's fantastic benefits of having it from a group of volunteers as well. There's lots of energy, lots of commitment and motivation and so forth. Yet what I'm arguing is that as soon as possible, that you're trying to hook this green team back into the formal structures of the organization. So at least there are people outside of the green team that have an interest in what the green team's activities are and are holding them to some sort of an account. It means that the organization shows formal interest, and it also means that there is some kind of motivation within the green team also to make sure that they're reporting off on things properly.
It's professionalizing, professionalizing it as an idea.
Yeah, and look, it seems so obvious when we talk to people within organizations about this kind of stuff, but I find that how we would run a formal committee that's related to the core business or to the operations of an organization, all this stuff would be in place. And yet with green teams, maybe because it's volunteers and maybe it's because it's got still to do with sustainability, we don't tend to translate that stuff across. And that is one of probably my take-home messages, is translate the things across of how you would normally run a team or a committee or a working group in your organization, that they come across to the way that you run your green team as well.
Do you have a suggestion, Mark, for a different name for a green team? Because maybe that's a sticking point for some organisations. You mentioned committee and working group. Is there like an efficiency committee or an engagement and efficiency working group? Or what other names have you come across?
Oh, everything from frogs to eco committees to sustainability steering group to you name it. I agree. I think you have to be very careful as to what the name is, because that needs to be determined by the culture in your organization. The frogs example, it was decided by the team that was an appropriate name based on the culture of the organization and what they were hoping the green team to be doing as well. I think it was an acronym for something. But in other cases, for an organization where the culture was perhaps more formal, they started to lean more towards the committee or the steering group or the working party or something like that. That took away that sort of fluffy flavor maybe that green teams might bring with them into this is actually a group that's set up to do something valuable and worthwhile for the organization. It's a good point, actually. I think that's a great little takeaway.
Yeah. That's a great takeaway for people to imagine this in the context of their own corporate culture, their own business culture, and that may speak to the success of it ultimately.
Yeah. Here at Monash, which is what Green Steps is a part of Monash, the role of their green team is to be conduits primarily for stuff that's happening from within a central sustainability team. So they call them the sustainability representatives, because they represent the sustainability agenda that comes from a centralized part within the university in their different localized campuses and departments. So the name reflects the culture as well as the purpose of the particular team as well. So that's the sort of things in terms of support that we mean here. And these are, and look, again, support could mean different things for different organizations, but it needs to have some kind of flavor of reporting of people with external to the green team actually interested in its activities as well. And that was certainly the case of what we found with at One Water, was it made it a more effective program because there were other people interested in what this team were doing as well.
Now, we've spoken about purpose and support, and I have a feeling that you're going to get onto the love section of the webinar, so I'm very excited about this bit.
Exactly.
Tell me all about that, Mark.
And I love talking about love. It feels so wonderfully hippie. And look, the take-home message from this really is that, like anything, a green team is for life. It's not just for Christmas. It's not just there to be set up initially with a blaze of fanfare and attention and then sort of slide off and be neglected for the remainder of the year, and then we sort of wonder where it all went to at the end of the year. This is an ongoing commitment. like anything that an organization does in the sustainability space, you start it off, it needs to be maintained in some way over then the months and the years that follow. I mean, again, this is what I see what don't happen with green teams, is that they're sort of set up initially, but there's no thought as to how we're going to maintain this over a period of time. So that's what I mean here by love. And the sort of things that I look at which signify that a green team is being loved are actually quite specific, and again seem very obvious. That there is some sort of resource that's available to the green team. It doesn't need to be a large resource. It could be even something as simple as the time that staff members are given to be a part of not just the meetings, but also the work that happens between the meetings. That there's some kind of an expectation that, yep, we will be giving people time to be involved. Maybe even that the green team has a small budget that it might be able to utilize to support particular activities. That yes, there are regular catch-ups that are planned, and that they may actually form part of a timetable for the green team that's been set out over a space of a year. Again, that goes back to the purpose of the team and what it was set up to do. And that could even be that an action plan for the team is developed as well, and is expected to follow up on that. That the progress of the green team monitors both its progress and that it's monitored externally as well. And again, that goes back to what the action plan of it was too. And the last thing to mention in terms of a green team is that the success of the green team is actually then celebrated and acknowledged. It's often easy to get caught up in, we have more stuff to do, this job never finishes. But from time to time that there's actually a bit of a review and refresh of, hey, we've achieved these things. Based on that, where can we go to next? So again, a regular cycle of monitoring, reviewing, celebrating success, and then planning for the next year, like we would do with any committee, any kind of team, any kind of group that are there to work on a particular project. We do exactly the same thing for a particular green team. And certainly the case from One and Water was that we had regular moments of review, both within the individual groups that were working on projects, and then the entire project itself was reviewed every year, and then a new plan was developed for the project for the following year as well. So, it's probably not that romantic, the type of love that I'm talking about here, Paul, but I think you're getting where I'm coming from.
Definitely, it's about support, and again with that theme of structure around it as well, but also recognizing that, especially if it's a volunteer aspect of somebody's day-to-day work, then that needs to be celebrated. They need to be supported and celebrated for the work that they're doing over and above what they would do in their regular 9 to 5, if that's the situation they find themselves in.
Yeah, and look, and I've just put up a slide here just to remind people that it's sort of the importance of this ongoing measuring, planning, doing, and reviewing. Again, it seems so obvious. So many of the things that we do cover are pretty obvious. Yet again, they don't tend to happen in green teams as much. And to be aware also with the green team that it will evolve over time. So the focus of the green team that may be in place for this year, based on what it's achieved, it might shift, and it should shift as well as different things within the organisation change, as potentially different areas within the overall sustainability agenda of the organisation shift. The role of the green team should also shift. So again, looking at the example of the green team that we have here at Monash, when it was initially started off, the staff had a very strong focus on collecting data because we wanted to get a sense of what the sustainability performance of the organisation was. That's now formalised, and we've got a pretty good idea of what that is. The role of the green team is now more to be one of representation from the central sustainability office to the diverse series of departments and schools and sites that we have across the campus.
So you've spoken here, and you've just brought this slide up, which is a good segue into what I was going to say about some really simple concepts: purpose, support, and love. I want to play devil's advocate here, Mark, and say that none of this is particularly groundbreaking.
Nope. No, you're right.
And is that the point, that it is simple, and it should be simple.
Yeah, and yeah, it is, and we've talked about it a couple of times already, Paul. It's I think again the way that we run green teams often seems to be disconnected to the way that we run other groups within the organisation. And again, the message here is to replicate the way that you might run a committee or a team or a working group on any other issue within your organisation. Repeat those same sort of structures and processes and principles behind that, so that you're talking. You know, you're running this team in the same way as you would others as well.
It's predictable in a language that they can digest, I suppose.
Yep, that's right. And and Paul, just to jump in, we're actually getting close to the end of the presentation. We've got a couple of tips that we just want to give people in terms of where you might start. But if people have questions that they would like to raise, please type those in now. One question which has been repeated a couple of times already is, will we be circulating the presentation? Yes, we will. So this presentation is being recorded, and Jeff Elliott or Paul will then let people know how it will be made available to them through the CitySwitch program.
That's right. So you did mention, and I know we're getting towards the pointy end, but there'll be people listening today that have started a green team before or who have never started a green team before. What are some quick tips to get people to take step one?
Yep. So this is Mark's handy hints. So the first tip is to be clear on what is the actual purpose of the team. You know, what's it there to do? And that's something that, you know, if you're the sustainability officer listening from your organization, you may have a clear idea based on the overall sustainability agenda of what you want a green team to do to complement some work that you might be doing or to fill a gap of something that hasn't been done. In other organizations, it might be a group of staff that are interested in this, sharing some ideas around and then narrowing those down to a couple of doable actions for a space of time. The second is to then actually select who that team will be. Now, what I see usually happen is an email is sent around to the organization calling for volunteers, which is a great first start. Do critically look at the representation of the organization that's within those volunteers. And are there any clear areas where the organization is not represented in? Are there any clear teams or sites or units which you might need to strategically tap a member of staff on the shoulder and say, would you join our green team because we really need the input of the person who manages our fleet, or we really need this depot to be represented? I often find actually in organizations that it's the staff related to the core business of the organization, whether it's client services or what have you, that don't tend to be represented in these teams. It's often the sort of back of house or operational staff for the organization, say HR and facilities and finance and so forth, that are there, but the ones who are there in the day-to-day core business are often not represented, and they definitely need their place at the table. Obviously, then you need management approval, not for the green team itself, but that people who are part of the green team have actually flagged this as something they'd like to join with their manager, and the manager has given them approval to do so based on the time required to be a part. And the last thing, and I hate to be, you know, the person who's just pouring cold water over lots of enthusiasm, is to start small. Set something which is realistic and achievable, and to start there rather than to try and do everything at once, which is often where green teams start, and then they become frustrated and disenchanted with everything because it hasn't been actually done. So that, Paul, is my 4 handy hints.
And 4 very good handy hints at that. Now, I can't see the questions in the question box because I don't have that access. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, we've got a few that are popping up actually, Paul, and I might go through a couple of them because we do have a couple of minutes. The first question is, one is that Green Team is a little further along. How do you keep the excitement alive? Fantastic idea, a fantastic question because it's a common one. I think a moment of reviewing and refreshing is probably needed. So a green team that's been established probably has quite an established purpose, and it's a point of, well, what have we actually achieved? Is our purpose still relevant, or based on what we've achieved and based on where the organization is at, do we need to change and be something else as well? That helps to refresh, I think, a green team, and it also helps them recognize what they've actually achieved. So those will be my suggestions to answer that particular question. There's another question about a call for volunteers in a large office where people might not know everybody. That again is a useful question to ask, because it's probably a reality. Again, it probably might be initially an email blast. Potentially, you might want to look at the way your organization talks to staff generally. Is there a general internal newsletter that goes out once a month or once a week? Is there a message, an all staff message that comes out from a senior manager? Is there some intranet updates? Is Yammer used, and so forth? So look at the way your organization talks to all staff and see if you can hook your call to volunteers within that, rather than try and replicate your own. It just means that you're already utilizing existing modes of communication that people actually look for, rather than trying to build something up yourself from scratch. And the last question, Paul, that we've got time to go on is any tips to engage and coordinate a green team from over 100 very different sites in Victoria? That is a very good question. And my response to that, based on the experience that I had here at Monash, is to be really clear on what you want your green team to do, down to the point of actually probably specifying some very discrete actions that they need to be doing, which fits into your overall sustainability agenda. Now, how you come to those actions might be a mixture of stuff that you want to see happen as a sustainability officer, but again, maybe having some kind of a collaborative half day or something where people come up with their ideas, and then from that there's a general purpose that's developed. But I think the broader your organization is, well, actually you can do it in two ways now that I think about it. One is you can be very specific and say, here's what we want every green team member to do, regardless of the site that you're in. Or you could actually do the flip and follow more the one and water example, which is, because you recognize there's a diversity of sites and a diversity of people, you ask teams to form around specific locally relevant projects, and they focus only on that. So and that's what they did in One and Water, was the teams came up with projects and each team then focused on that for the space of a year. So that might be another way, either being really tightly regimented in what you get them to do, or to ask them to develop something that's locally specific and to focus only their attention on that. And then your role is to sort of provide the monitoring and the review structure and the support structure that goes along with that. Paul, any additions really from you for those sort of questions and my responses?
No, I think that's a really good example that there are different ways of approaching a situation like that, and we do have signatories that have multiple offices all around the country, and it is, as you said, that it's an opportunity to let them do their own work, so long as you structure that person structures the green teams around the existing culture, which is what we've touched on already, and work it like another working group would exist within that organisation, rather than it trying to be completely separate from how that organisation already works.
And Paul, just to jump in and add one last point to that before you close up, because I'm conscious of time. If you are asking people to look, you can develop your own localised project. Do make sure that they run the idea past you, and so it fits in again to the overall sustainability agenda of the organization, because you don't want there to be such a broad scattering of projects that it becomes all very nebulous and vague. So what we did at One and Water was we made sure that project ideas fitted into the sustainability strategy of the organization, and that we could say, well, look, here was an idea on staff engagement around sustainable transport. Well, that fits into the emissions strategy that the organization had, and also fitted into the sustainable transport strategy that they had. So there is some kind of a home for the project idea, even if it is still a very localized one.
And I think that goes to getting representation and getting buy-in. If you can hang it off a larger strategy or a larger strategic direction, then it's more likely that that's going to get some runs on the board.
Exactly.
We have come to the end, haven't we? I would like to thank you again so much, Mark, for a great presentation, and remind everybody in CitySwitch that we do have some existing toolkits for running workplace competitions and fostering green champions at work. So really great, useful toolkits that you can use alongside what you've learned here. And also, as you all know, here in Victoria or in your whatever state you're in, you have a CitySwitch Pro program manager that you can refer to for support and advice. Many of those program managers will be listening into this webinar today, so if you have any further questions, do feel free to send them to myself or Jeff, but also go to your CitySwitch program manager, who is going to be well worded up on all things staff engagement and green teams. So that's all from me. Anything final from you, Mark?
Nope, thank you all. It's been a pleasure as always.
Thank you so much. Good luck, everybody, and I hope to hear from you soon. Bye.